The silence before the crash. The text came in at 1:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because I had been staring at the glow of my monitor when the vibration rattled across the cheap particle board desk beside me. The apartment was dark except for the blue light of code reflected in the window. Outside, rain crawled down the glass in crooked streams, turning downtown Phoenix into a blur of neon and shadow. For a moment, I thought Nadia was finally answering one of my calls. Instead, I watched 3 words appear on the screen. I am leaving you. No greeting, no explanation, no hesitation. A second bubble appeared immediately after. Kyle showed me what real ambition looks like. Then another. I am done pretending this tiny life is enough. I stared at the words while the servers hummed softly behind me. People think devastation arrives like an explosion. It doesn't, not always. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a wire disconnecting somewhere deep inside your chest. I leaned back in my chair and listened to the rain. The apartment around me suddenly felt smaller than it already was. 1 bedroom. Peeling paint near the kitchen sink. A dying ficus in the corner. Nadia had stopped watering months ago. Half our furniture came from thrift stores because I insisted we didn't need more. She hated that. Hated the old couch. Hated my 12-year-old Honda. Hated the way I wore the same gray hoodies every day like some anonymous tech support guy. She thought I lacked drive, vision, status. The irony almost made me laugh. Instead, I unlocked my phone and opened the final image she'd sent. A photo. Kyle Torres stood beside her on the balcony of a luxury resort in Monaco, grinning into the camera with expensive sunglasses and a tailored white suit. Nadia leaned against him in a silver dress I'd never seen before. Champagne in hand, the city lights sparkling behind them like gold dust. Her caption read, "Trading up." I stared at the image for a very long time. Then I quietly set the phone face down. No anger, not yet. Just stillness, the dangerous kind. Because when you spend your life hiding what you truly are, silence becomes a weapon. And I had spent nearly a decade hiding everything. Most people knew Marcus Kane as a freelance consultant, the quiet guy who fixed network security for dental offices and accounting firms, the forgettable technician who worked remotely from a tiny apartment and charged surprisingly modest rates, the man who looked like he barely earned enough to survive. That was intentional. The real Marcus Kane had vanished 11 years earlier, back when crypto still belonged to idealists, anarchists, gamblers, and geniuses, before influencers. Before corporate conferences, before celebrities launched meme coins while pretending to understand decentralized finance, before vultures like Kyle Torres arrived, wearing designer watches and calling themselves visionaries. I had been 28 when I built Argentum, the stablecoin nobody knew I created, the foundation beneath half the decentralized finance ecosystem, now worth hundreds of billions. Officially, Argentum had no founder, no face, no headquarters, just a mysterious pseudonym buried deep in blockchain mythology. Aion forums treated Aion like a ghost story. Some believed the creator was dead. Others believed Aion was a consortium of developers. A few conspiracy theorists claimed governments secretly controlled the project. None of them knew the truth. The truth was sitting alone in a dark apartment wearing sweatpants while his wife left him for a fintech celebrity. I opened my laptop slowly. 3 monitors flickered awake. Cold wallets, node access, private chains, validator permissions, the architecture of an invisible empire, and buried beneath it all, power, real power, not the fake social media kind Nadia chased, not Kyle's rented Lamborghini lifestyle, actual leverage over markets, over liquidity, over digital wealth itself. I typed one command into a hidden terminal. The screen responded instantly. "Welcome back, Aion." My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Tired eyes, unshaven face. A man nobody noticed. Perfect. Because invisible men hear everything, and invisible men are underestimated right until the moment the floor disappears beneath everyone else. I met Nadia before the money became incomprehensible, back when Argentum was still experimental code stitched together with caffeine and paranoia. She had been working at a rooftop bar in Scottsdale, balancing trays while aspiring entrepreneurs flooded the place pretending they were the next Steve Jobs. Nadia stood out immediately. Not just because she was beautiful, though she was dark hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes that made people confess things they shouldn't. No, what caught me was the hunger in her. She looked at wealthy people the way starving people stare through bakery windows. Not jealousy, calculation. I understood that look because I'd worn it myself once. She approached my table near midnight. "You look miserable," she said. I glanced up from my laptop. "I am debugging." "That sounds even worse." I almost smiled. Almost she noticed. "You are a computer guy?" "Something like that." Dangerous answer. "Why, because mysterious men either end up billionaires or serial killers. And which one do I seem like?" She leaned slightly closer. "Honestly, you look broke." That made me laugh. And somehow, that was the beginning. The early years were good. Or at least I believe they were. We rented tiny apartments while Argentum quietly expanded underground. I slept 4 hours a night building infrastructure no one would fully understand for years. Nadia supported me then, or appeared to. She brought coffee to my desk, rubbed my shoulders during coding marathons, told me she believed I was destined for something enormous. But success changes people differently depending on what they worship. I worshipped anonymity. Nadia worshipped visibility. The first time she asked how much Argentum was truly worth, I lied. Not because I distrusted her, because secrecy protected everything. The fewer people who knew about the founder wallets, the safer the ecosystem remained. Safer from governments, hackers, extortion, manipulation, even spouses, especially spouses. At the time, she accepted my explanations, until social media poisoned her expectations. Instagram changed her. Then crypto influencers finished the job. Suddenly everyone online was rich, or pretending to be 20-year-olds filming themselves beside rented yachts. Tech founders posting motivational garbage beside private jets. Women flaunting diamond bracelets bought with pump and dump schemes. Every night, Nadia scrolled endlessly through lives she believed she deserved. Eventually, she began comparing them to ours. "Why are we still living like this?" she asked one night. I kept typing. "Like what?" "Poor?" I looked around our condo. It wasn't luxurious, but it was comfortable. "We're not poor. We shop at Costco, Marcus." "Costco's efficient," she laughed bitterly. "That's your answer to everything. Efficient, safe, practical." What's wrong with practical? Nothing. If you want a small life, I remember stopping then, actually turning toward her. "What exactly do you think I am building?" "I don't know anymore," she whispered. That was the first crack. Kyle Torres became the second. Kyle entered our lives through one of Nadia's influencer partnerships. He had built a flashy fintech app called Vexora. Officially, it simplified decentralized investing for mainstream users. Unofficially, it was a beautifully packaged liquidity trap, wrapped in marketing buzzwords. I knew because I recognized the code framework instantly. Mine. Years earlier, I'd released an open-source architecture layer under a shell identity. Thousands of developers built on it, Kyle included. But unlike most programmers, Kyle modified core security permissions recklessly. He prioritized growth over integrity. Typical startup narcissist behavior. Nadia adored him immediately. Of course she did. Kyle looked like money. Tailored suits, perfect teeth, a watch worth more than our car. He talked constantly about disruption, scaling, acquisition targets, and venture capital rounds, the kind of language that sounds intelligent to people who confuse confidence with competence. The first time we met, he shook my hand too firmly. "Marcus, right? Nadia says, you are in it." "Something like that," he grinned. "Tech guys are the future." "Man, I suppose. You should check out Vexora sometime. We're changing finance forever." I nearly smiled at that. Instead, I said, "Be careful with leverage pools." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Oh, you understand DeFi?" "A little?" He laughed. "Everyone understands crypto until the market turns. Everyone understands profit until the market turns. Only architects understand collapse." The affair began long before Nadia officially left. I knew that now there had been signs. Late night brand meetings, weekend retreats. Her sudden obsession with luxury fashion, the way she hid her phone screen. But betrayal is strange. You can detect it intellectually long before your heart accepts it emotionally. I ignored what I knew because some part of me still loved her. Or maybe I loved who she used to be. Here is a difference. The night she finally left, she didn't even bother coming home, she texted. That was it. 12 years reduced to glowing words on a screen. No screaming match, no dramatic confrontation, just deletion. I sat motionless for nearly an hour afterward. Then, I opened one of the hidden vaults. The balance displayed across multiple cold storage wallets exceeded $43 billion equivalent. Numbers beyond ordinary comprehension, enough to destabilize nations if moved incorrectly. Enough to destroy people. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Still no anger, just clarity. Because Nadia hadn't merely cheated on me. Kyle hadn't merely stolen my wife. They had unknowingly built their empire atop my foundation, and now they intended to profit from humiliating me publicly. That was the mistake. Arrogant people always mistake quietness for weakness. They see restraint and assume inability. But restraint is often calculation. I opened an encrypted archive labeled Colorado Contingencies. Inside were dormant smart contracts written years earlier, insurance protocols, kill switches, market stabilizers, and one particular sequence I'd once designed as a theoretical defense against hostile ecosystem manipulation. I had never activated it, never intended to, until now. I reviewed the structure carefully. Trigger conditions, liquidity withdrawal chains, automated stablecoin stress responses, recursive smart contract executions. If deployed strategically, the sequence wouldn't destroy Argentum, but it would annihilate over-leveraged ecosystems dependent on synthetic collateral, like Vexora, like Kyle's entire fortune, like Nadia's influencer investment portfolios. I leaned back slowly. Rain hammered the windows harder now. Thunder rolled across the city, and for the first time all night, I smiled. 3 weeks later, Nadia filed for divorce. Not personally, of course. Her lawyer handled everything. The paperwork arrived electronically, cold, efficient, transactional. She wanted half of all declared assets, which was amusing considering my declared assets made me look lower middle class. The filing also contained a digital marital agreement she'd barely remembered signing years earlier. A blockchain, authenticated prenup embedded into an experimental smart contract platform I developed privately. She'd signed it during one of our future proofing discussions after crypto regulations tightened. At the time she joked she'd never understand my nerd language. She never read the deeper clauses. Nobody ever does. But hidden inside the contract was a behavioral trigger protocol, a fidelity clause tied to verified digital evidence. At the time, it had been theoretical. A joke, almost. A programmable marriage contract. If betrayal conditions were met, asset ownership shifted automatically, irrevocably: wallets, tokens, NFT holdings, future royalties, sponsored partnership revenue streams, everything. At the time, Nadia signed it because she trusted me completely. Irony is beautiful sometimes. I uploaded the evidence quietly: photos, messages, location records, financial transfers from Kyle. The smart contract processed for exactly 11 seconds. Then the ledger updated permanent, final, across dozens of hidden wallets, billions in influencer earnings, speculative investments, and tokenized assets instantly rerouted through ownership structures she couldn't even comprehend. Nadia didn't notice immediately. That was the best part. Meanwhile, Kyle Torres prepared for the biggest conference of his life, Cryptex Global Dubai, the annual circus where crypto executives pretended they weren't terrified of each other. Kyle had landed a keynote panel discussing the future of decentralized consumer finance. Vexora's valuation had exploded recently, mostly due to liquidity mechanisms secretly tied to Argentum's reserve architecture, which meant Kyle's success existed because I allowed it to exist. He just didn't know it yet. I watched his interviews online, watched Nadia beside him wearing designer gowns while interviewers called them the power couple of next-gen finance. She laughed differently around him, more performative, more artificial, every smile calculated for clips and reposts. But occasionally, beneath the filters and confidence, I saw flickers of anxiety in her eyes. Some part of her sensed instability. Good. Fear is honest. The internet adored them. That made what came next even more satisfying. Because public worship creates maximum public collapse. I spent the next month preparing, not emotionally. Technically, emotion had no place in what I was building now. This required precision. I reactivated dormant validator nodes across multiple continents, secured shell corporations, moved liquidity through layered custody chains impossible to trace in real time, prepared media packets, identity proofs, original white papers, cryptographic signatures proving I was Aion. I also examined Kyle's app architecture in detail. The backdoor vulnerability remained intact. Laughably so. Years earlier, while publishing open-source modules, I embedded hidden recursive authority permissions designed to activate only under extremely specific conditions. Most developers removed them. Kyle hadn't, probably because he didn't fully understand the code he'd copied. His developers built an empire atop invisible quicksand, and now I was going to liquefy the ground beneath them. Not illegally. That's the beauty of code. It obeys whoever truly understands it. One night, about 2 weeks before the conference, Nadia finally called me. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Marcus? Her voice sounded uncertain. Fragile. I said nothing. I just wanted to make sure you are okay. Interesting, not guilt. Maintenance. People like Nadia hate unresolved emotional threads. I am fine, I said. Silence lingered. Then she sighed softly. You could have fought for me. I laughed quietly at that. Actually laughed. You left me through a text message. You stopped caring long before that. No, I replied calmly. I stopped advertising my feelings. That's not the same thing. Maybe not. Another pause, then she lowered her voice. Kyle thinks you hate him. I barely know him. That's not what I mean. Of course it wasn't. Nadia had always been perceptive beneath the narcissism. She sensed danger now, not specifically, but instinctively. You don't need to worry about me, I said. I wasn't. You should worry about yourself. The silence after that felt different. Colder. Marcus? You once asked me why I lived so modestly? What? You said it meant I lacked ambition. I didn't call to fight. No, I said softly. You called because somewhere deep down, you are starting to realize you never actually knew me. And then I hung up. That night, for the first time in weeks, I opened an old photo folder. Pictures from before the money became monstrous. Before influence poisoned everything. Nadia laughing in cheap diners. Nadia asleep on my shoulder during cross-country drives. Nadia helping me test early Argentum interfaces at 3 in the morning while eating takeout noodles. The woman in those photos would never have left me for Kyle Torres, but that woman no longer existed. Maybe she never had. Maybe ambition simply stripped away the disguise. I closed the folder, then I initiated Phase 1. Across decentralized exchanges worldwide, dormant contracts quietly awakened. Liquidity pools shifted fractions of percentages. Validator timings altered. Collateral weighting changed invisibly beneath market surfaces. Tiny movements. Undetectable individually. Catastrophic collectively. Like tectonic plates before an earthquake. And somewhere in Dubai, Kyle Torres smiled for cameras without realizing the apocalypse had already begun beneath his feet. The crash just hadn't reached the surface yet, but it would. Soon. Very soon. Everyone has a story. Some are about love. Some are about betrayal. And some are about the moment a quiet person finally stopped being underestimated. Welcome to Vengeance Narratives, where revenge is intelligent, psychological, and unforgettable. If you've lived through betrayal, humiliation, deception, or silent heartbreak, share your story with us. Your experience could inspire the next gripping narrative. Because the most dangerous stories are the true ones. Subscribe, like, and share. It will help our channel grow. Chapter 2. Ghosts in the Ledger. People imagine revenge as rage. Explosions, screaming, broken glass, and public scenes. But real revenge, the kind that changes lives permanently, is patient. It unfolds in silence while the other person keeps smiling for photographs. That was the part Nadia and Kyle never understood. They thought survival belonged to the loudest people in the room. But markets don't care about charisma. Code doesn't care about confidence. And money, real money, rarely belongs to the people showing it off online. 2 days after my phone call with Nadia, the first fractures appeared inside Vexora. Not publicly. Not yet. The public never notices the beginning of a collapse. They only remember the moment everything catches fire. But deep inside the system, things had started moving wrong. Yield calculations lagged. Micro-withdrawals failed to reconcile. Liquidity balancing scripts entered recursive loops that consumed tiny percentages of reserves. Invisible losses, pennies disappearing by the millions. Kyle's engineers blamed traffic scaling, then server latency, then regional node congestion. Typical arrogance. Nobody suspects sabotage when success still looks profitable, especially in crypto. The entire industry survives on denial. I watched the metrics from my apartment while rain drifted across the city again. Phoenix rarely saw storms this late in the season. But the weather had turned strange lately. Maybe that's what happens when too many systems become unstable at once. One monitor displayed live Argentum reserve data. Another tracked Vexora wallet activity. The third showed social media sentiment analysis surrounding Kyle and Nadia. They were peaking, exactly as I wanted. Kyle had just announced a new expansion partnership in Singapore. Nadia posted daily luxury content from Dubai ahead of the conference. Private villas, helicopter tours, designer jewelry. Building the future with visionaries, one caption read. The comments flooded with envy. Goals, power couple, crypto royalty. I zoomed in on a tagged image of Nadia wearing an emerald necklace worth roughly $80,000. Purchased through a layered wallet sequence that originally traced back to me. She still didn't know. That fascinated me most. How completely she misunderstood the world she lived in. Every luxury she flaunted online had been indirectly funded by the man she called small. Her followers worshipped an illusion I had quietly financed from the shadows, and now I was going to erase it. At 3:12 a.m., an encrypted message appeared on one of my hidden channels. Unknown node requesting authentication. Interesting. Nobody should have been able to access that layer. I opened the packet carefully. A single line appeared. You are active again. No signature, no identifier. But I recognized the formatting style immediately. Victor Liang, one of the original Argentum architects, or rather, the only surviving one besides me. Back in the early days, there had been 4 of us. Idealists convinced decentralized currency could free people from institutional corruption. Then the money arrived. Money destroys purity faster than bullets. One developer disappeared into venture capital. Another died from an overdose in Berlin. Victor vanished after governments started investigating stablecoins internationally. Only I remained. I typed slowly. You shouldn't be here. 3 dots appeared instantly. And you shouldn't be moving reserve structures during peak conference season. I leaned back slightly. Victor always had terrifying instincts. Even years later, monitoring me, monitoring Argentum. Same as always, I considered disconnecting. Instead, I asked, what do you want? His response took longer this time. You are preparing a kill sequence, not a question. A statement. I stared at the screen, then typed, no laws are being broken. Victor replied immediately. That's the problem. I first met Victor in an abandoned warehouse in San Francisco, 11 years earlier, before crypto became corporate, before billion-dollar valuations and celebrity endorsements. Back then, developers met in forgotten places because governments still treated decentralized finance like cyber-terrorism. Victor had looked like a philosophy professor instead of an engineer. Thin frame, silver-rimmed glasses, permanent exhaustion behind intelligent eyes. He understood systems better than anyone I'd ever known. Not just technology, human systems, power systems, psychological systems. Everyone thinks money is wealth. He once told me while we built early consensus models. It isn't. What is? Control over trust. That line stayed with me for years, because he was right. Currencies only work because people believe they work, and belief is fragile. That's why stablecoins mattered. That's why Argentum became indispensable. We built trust infrastructure for a digital civilization, and now I was weaponizing it. Victor understood the implications immediately, which meant he also understood how dangerous I had become. The next morning, Nadia finally noticed something was wrong. Not catastrophic, just wrong. It started with a declined payment in Dubai, a luxury boutique. One of her sponsored crypto debit accounts froze during checkout. The clerk smiled politely while retrying the transaction. Again, again, Nadia laughed awkwardly for social media appearances. Crypto problems, she joked. But according to the internal metrics I monitored, her account wasn't malfunctioning. Ownership had shifted. The smart contract prenup had begun fully executing. Revenue, rerouting, wallet inheritance migration. Royalty transfer sequences. Every monetized digital asset tied to her verified identity now flowed elsewhere. To me, the process was elegant, invisible, legal. By the time she understood the scale of it, recovery would be impossible. That afternoon, she called Kyle. I listened through a mirrored cloud backup attached to one of the devices she'd once authorized me to maintain. People always forget how much access husbands retain. Kyle, something's wrong with my accounts. What kind of wrong? My sponsorship wallet isn't working. Probably exchange lag? It's not lag. You are panicking. I can't access 3 wallets. Pause. Then I heard keyboard typing, Kyle checking. Seconds later, his tone changed slightly. Huh? What? Some holdings moved. What do you mean moved? Transferred. To where? Longer silence. That's weird. Fear entered her voice then. Real fear. My NFTs are gone. Probably custody migration. Kyle, relax. Don't tell me to relax. Babe, the market's overloaded right now. No, she whispered. Something's happening. Yes, something was happening. The tide was going out. They just couldn't see how far yet. Kyle arrived in Dubai fully convinced he was becoming one of the new faces of global fintech. The conference organizers treated him like royalty. Interviews, investor dinners, private yacht networking events. Crypto people love pretending they're rebels while behaving exactly like bankers. Kyle fit perfectly into that ecosystem. His keynote banner stretched 30 feet high across the convention hall. Vexora, redefining digital freedom. I nearly laughed when I saw it. Freedom. The app secretly depended on reserve structures Kyle didn't control, security permissions he didn't understand, and code pathways he never noticed. A child standing atop a nuclear reactor, believing he built the sun. Meanwhile, I remained invisible. Exactly where power functions best. I flew to Dubai privately under another identity 2 nights before the conference began. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to watch them closely when the collapse started. Here is value in witnessing consequences firsthand. I checked into a quiet hotel overlooking the marina. No luxury branding, no influencers, no crypto celebrities, just silence. My suite contained 6 secured laptops, 2 satellite uplinks, and cold storage authentication hardware worth more than most hedge funds. Outside my window, Dubai glittered like a hallucination built from oil money and ego. Perfect setting for a financial execution. That evening, Victor contacted me again. This time through video. I almost ignored it, then accepted. His face appeared in darkness somewhere unknown. Older now, more tired. You actually went through with it, he said quietly. I am going through with it. That's worse. I poured whiskey into a glass. You always did enjoy dramatic phrasing. You are destabilizing interconnected liquidity chains. Temporary volatility. Victor stared at me, number. You are engineering panic. Panic reveals structural weakness. That's not what this is about. No, I admitted, it isn't. Silence lingered. Then he asked the real question. Is this because of the woman? I smiled faintly. Interesting that you think it's about heartbreak. What else would justify this level of escalation? I walked toward the windows overlooking Dubai. Thousands of lights burned beneath the night sky. Money everywhere. Illusions everywhere. She didn't betray Marcus Kane, I said softly. She betrayed anonymity itself. Victor frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means she exposed herself to the wrong man. You are rationalizing. No, I replied calmly. I am correcting ownership. Victor removed his glasses slowly. I remember when Argentum meant something to you. It still does. You are about to weaponize public trust for personal revenge. I turned toward the screen. You think governments won't do worse eventually? That doesn't make this right. Right? I laughed quietly. Kyle built a multi-billion-dollar valuation on stolen infrastructure. Nadia monetized a fabricated luxury identity funded through hidden wallets she never earned. Investors flooded into synthetic leverage structures nobody fully understood. Victor remained silent, because he knew I wasn't wrong, only dangerous. "Here is still time to stop this," he said finally. "No," I answered. "There isn't." Then I ended the call. The first public tremor hit the market at 8:43 a.m. Dubai time. Small enough to dismiss, large enough to matter. Argentum briefly depegged by 1.8%. Financial journalists immediately flooded social media. Speculation exploded. Bot activity surged. Influencers reassured followers it was healthy correction volatility. Kyle posted confidently, "Strong ecosystems survive stress. Vexora remains fully secure." That tweet alone caused millions in fresh deposits. Poor bastards. They had no idea they were buying tickets onto a sinking ship. Within 2 hours, Vexora's internal balancing systems began cannibalizing reserve collateral automatically, exactly as designed. Or rather, exactly as I designed them years earlier. Kyle's modifications amplified the effect catastrophically. Recursive leverage loops began multiplying losses exponentially beneath the visible layer. Still invisible publicly, still survivable. For now, that afternoon I saw Nadia for the first time since she left. The conference hosted a private networking gala atop the Burj Khalifa. Invitation only. Crypto aristocracy pretending civilization wasn't one recession away from cannibalism. I entered wearing a tailored black suit beneath an identity. Nobody questioned. Money opens every door, if applied correctly. Nadia stood near the glass wall overlooking the city, surrounded by influencers and startup founders. She looked stunning. Of course she did. That had always been part of her power. People underestimated beautiful women until they realized beauty itself could manipulate entire rooms. But tonight, something was different. Tension, subtle, almost invisible. She kept checking her phone. Kyle noticed too. He smiled for investors while quietly monitoring market charts between conversations. Fear had entered the room already. Most people simply couldn't smell it yet. Then Nadia saw me. At first her expression showed confusion. She clearly hadn't expected me there. Then shock, because I didn't look like the Marcus she remembered, not the exhausted consultant in faded hoodies, not the quiet husband fixing routers at kitchen tables. I crossed the room calmly. Her eyes widened slightly. "Marcus? Hello, Nadia? What are you doing here?" "Conference. You hate conferences." "I dislike attention." Her gaze moved across my suit, my watch, my posture. Something in her expression shifted. Not recognition, calculation, like she was seeing puzzle pieces rearrange themselves internally. "You look," she started softly. "Different." "Yes," I smiled faintly. "So do you." That irritated her instantly. "Good. Are you stalking us?" "Number. Then why are you here?" "Busyness." She folded her arms. "You don't work in crypto." I looked directly into her eyes. "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." That landed harder than I expected, not because of the words, because of the certainty behind them. Before she could respond, Kyle approached. Perfect timing. "Marcus," he said, forcing friendliness. "Didn't know you'd be here. You didn't ask." Kyle chuckled. "Nadia says you are consulting now." "Something like that." He nodded distractedly, while checking his phone again. Market anxiety was chewing through him already. I noticed sweat beginning near his collar despite the air conditioning. "Interesting." "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah? Just conference chaos?" He studied me briefly, then smiled again, artificial, overcompensating. "You should check out tomorrow's keynote," he said. "Big announcements coming." I wouldn't miss it. Nadia looked between us uneasily. Her instincts were screaming now. I could see it. But instincts without information only produce dread. And dread is exhausting. I leaned slightly closer toward Kyle, quiet enough only he could hear. "You should really audit your reserve pathways." His smile faltered. "What?" "The recursive balancing architecture." His eyes narrowed. "How do you know about that?" I held his gaze for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Good night, Kyle." And I walked away. 3 hours later, he started investigating. Exactly as expected. By midnight, Vexora engineers were in emergency calls across 4 countries. Reserve discrepancies had accelerated dramatically. Wallet drainage patterns no longer made mathematical sense. Liquidity wasn't merely shrinking. It was evaporating through ghost transactions buried inside layered smart contracts. The back door had awakened fully. Kyle finally discovered the signature marker embedded in the original framework, a tiny encrypted identifier buried in dormant code. Aion. I know the exact moment he found it because he stopped breathing for nearly 6 seconds according to the stress biometrics from his smartwatch cloud sync. Panic does strange things to the human body. At 2:11 a.m., Nadia entered their penthouse suite while Kyle screamed at developers through encrypted calls. "What's happening?" she asked. No answer. Kyle, still typing furiously. Kyle. He slammed the laptop shut violently. "We've got a problem." "How bad?" He looked at her, actually looked at her, and for the first time since she met him, Nadia saw fear. Real fear. The system's compromised. What does that mean? It means somebody's inside the architecture. Can you stop it? Silence, then quietly, "I don't know." That was the moment the illusion truly began collapsing. Not financially, psychologically, because confidence is the currency people like Kyle trade in, and once confidence cracks, everything else follows. At sunrise, I sat alone on my hotel balcony, watching Dubai awaken beneath gold light. The market instability had spread globally overnight. Financial news outlets called it temporary volatility. Analysts urged calm. Investors doubled down. Perfect. I sipped coffee while monitoring live panic metrics. Fear was spreading exactly within projected ranges, but underneath all the numbers, I felt something unexpected. Sadness. Not for Kyle, not even for Nadia. For myself, because vengeance reveals truths you spend years avoiding, and somewhere beneath the strategy, beneath the precision, beneath the cold satisfaction, I finally admitted something painful. I had loved her completely, even while hiding who I was, maybe especially because I hid who I was. The apartment, the quiet life, the modest routines, those weren't deceptions. They were experiments. I wanted to know if someone could love me without loving the empire behind me. Now I had my answer, and somehow, that hurt more than the betrayal itself. By noon, Argentum's peg slipped another 4%. Vexora reserves entered emergency status. Kyle's keynote remained scheduled for tomorrow morning. The largest audience of his life waited for him, and I intended to destroy him in front of all of them. But first, I needed Nadia to understand exactly who she abandoned, and the ledger was finally ready to show her. Chapter 3. The Man Behind Aion. Nadia didn't sleep that night. Neither did Kyle. Fear had entered their penthouse like smoke, curling into every corner, clinging to every conversation, poisoning every silence between them. By 3:00 a.m., the luxury suite looked less like the headquarters of a rising fintech empire, and more like a war room moments before surrender. Laptops covered the dining table, empty glasses, cold coffee, dozens of encrypted chats flashing across multiple screens. Kyle barked orders at exhausted developers scattered across Singapore, Berlin, Toronto, and Seoul. Nobody had answers, only symptoms. Liquidity loss accelerating, ghost transactions, recursive wallet drains, automated reserve movements triggering against themselves, and worst of all, a signature hidden inside the architecture. Aion. Kyle stared at the identifier like it was cursed, because in crypto, legends matter, and Aion was one of the oldest legends in existence. Nobody knew who built Argentum. Nobody knew whether Aion was alive, but every serious blockchain engineer understood one thing. If Aion returned, markets would move, governments would panic, and fortunes could disappear overnight. Kyle looked physically sick now. Sweat darkened the collar of his white shirt. His confidence, the thing Nadia loved most about him, was collapsing in real time. "Tell me again exactly what Marcus said," he demanded. Nadia folded her arms tightly. "He told you to audit your reserve pathways." Kyle paced across the suite. "That's impossible." "What is?" "He shouldn't know that phrase." "Maybe he Googled it." Kyle stopped walking. Number something colder entered his voice then. something approaching realization. That terminology only exists inside developer-level architecture. Nadia frowned. What does that mean? It means your husband isn't some random consultant. The words hung in the air. For the first time since leaving me, Nadia looked genuinely uncertain about her own memories. And once doubt enters a relationship, every past moment changes shape. You think he hacked you? She asked. Kyle laughed nervously. Hacked? Nadia, if this is what I think it is, hacking would have been easier. Then, what is happening? Kyle stared toward the dark windows overlooking Dubai, then quietly said, the one thing she never expected to hear. I think Marcus built something much bigger than either of us knew. Meanwhile, across the city, I sat alone in silence. No panic, no rushing. Just systems executing exactly as intended. The hotel suite remained dark, except for the glow of monitors illuminating the room in pale blue. Outside, Dubai still sparkled with obscene wealth and artificial perfection. Inside, invisible wars were already underway. I watched billions shift across blockchain ledgers like rivers changing direction. Argentum's temporary instability had triggered exactly the behavioral patterns I predicted. Retail investors panicked first. Institutional players followed cautiously. Whales quietly repositioned. And beneath all of it, Kyle's ecosystem bled itself dry through hidden recursive permissions he never fully understood. The backdoor wasn't malicious by design. That was the elegant part. Originally, it had been a recovery mechanism, a failsafe. If reserve integrity became compromised, the architecture could silently reclaim vulnerable assets to preserve network survival. Most developers removed those permissions. Kyle hadn't. His arrogance kept them intact. Now, the system viewed Vexora itself as the threat, so the architecture was cannibalizing him automatically. I checked the drain totals. Over 600 million equivalent lost already. And nobody outside the core systems understood why. Perfect. Then my encrypted terminal flashed again. Victor. I almost ignored him. Instead, I answered. You are escalating faster than projected, he said immediately. You sound worried. I am worried. For Kyle? For everyone? I leaned back calmly. The ecosystem survives. That's not the point. No, I agreed softly. It really is. Victor removed his glasses again, rubbing tired eyes. You know what people trusted about Argentum, that it worked. That it was neutral. I smiled faintly. Nothing created by human beings is neutral. Marcus, no, I interrupted. You want honesty. Fine. The system was always capable of this. I simply understood it better than everyone else. Victor stared at me carefully. You are proving the critics right. About what? That decentralized systems eventually become monarchies. That almost made me laugh. Monarchies are visible. And you think invisibility makes this moral? Moral, I echoed quietly. Kyle built synthetic wealth on copied infrastructure while pretending he invented financial freedom. Nadia monetized status she never earned. Investors worshipped charisma over substance. That still doesn't justify collapse. I walked toward the balcony. Sunrise had begun spilling gold across the skyline. Beautiful, artificial, temporary. Victor, I said softly, do you know the difference between old money and new money? He didn't answer. Old money hides. New money performs. I turned back toward the screen. Kyle and Nadia wanted an audience. I smiled faintly. So I am giving them one. Then I disconnected again. By mid-morning, rumors exploded online. Anonymous posts claimed Argentum reserves were compromised. Others insisted a hostile takeover was underway. Conspiracy channels flooded social media with theories about Aion's return. Crypto influencers panicked publicly while pretending not to panic. Exactly the same behavior every time markets turn. Confidence theater. Meanwhile, Nadia's personal nightmare accelerated quietly. Her management agency called first, then sponsors, then brand partners. Every conversation sounded increasingly uncomfortable. Payment delays, wallet verification problems, contract reviews, compliance concerns. At first, she blamed temporary market instability. Then she logged into her primary NFT vault. Zero balance, not hidden, not frozen, gone. She checked another wallet. Empty. Another, nothing. Her breathing quickened immediately. No, she whispered. Kyle turned toward her from across the suite. What? My accounts? What about them? They're gone. He walked over quickly. Show me. She shoved the phone into his hands. Kyle's expression changed almost instantly, not confusion, recognition, which was worse, because now he understood the pattern. This can't be happening, he muttered. Nadia grabbed his arm. Fix it. I am trying. Fix it. Kyle pulled away sharply. Stop screaming at me. Silence slammed into the room. They stared at each other, and for the first time, the glamorous power couple illusion cracked visibly. Because pressure reveals people, not success. Pressure. Kyle looked terrified. Nadia looked betrayed. Interesting symmetry. Then her phone buzzed again. An automated notification. Blockchain contract executed, asset ownership updated, irreversible transfer. Confirmed. She frowned. What is this? Kyle read the screen slowly. Then his face went pale. Marcus? What? This transfer authority. His voice weakened. It originated years ago? I don't understand. Kyle looked directly at her. Your husband built a smart prenup. The room went silent again. Nadia blinked slowly. A what? Programmable asset ownership? That's impossible? No, Kyle whispered. It's genius. She grabbed the phone back frantically. There has to be a way to reverse it. Kyle didn't answer, because he knew blockchain finality is merciless. Once executed correctly, there is no undo button. That's the whole point. Across Dubai, conference organizers still believed everything remained under control. The keynote panel was proceeding exactly on schedule. Financial media continued promoting Vixora as one of the hottest companies in decentralized finance. Kyle's face appeared on giant digital banners across the convention center. The future of trust. The irony had become almost poetic. I arrived at the venue shortly before noon. This time I entered openly. Not hiding, not rushing. The conference hall pulsed with noise and artificial excitement. Thousands of attendees, investors, developers, influencers, journalists, everyone pretending innovation mattered more than money. Security recognized my credentials instantly. Special access, prepared quietly weeks earlier. As I crossed the main floor, giant screens displayed live market coverage. Argentum had slipped another 8%. Analysts called it concerning, but survivable. Nobody realized the real collapse hadn't started yet. I moved calmly through the crowd while snippets of conversation floated around me. Think, it's manipulation. Heard sovereign funds are involved. No way, Aion is real. Vexora is still strong. They're saying reserve pressure's temporary. Human beings are fascinating during disasters. Most people cling hardest to comforting lies seconds before impact. I entered a private executive lounge overlooking the main auditorium. And there, standing alone near the glass wall, was Nadia. For a moment she didn't notice me. She looked exhausted now. Mascara slightly smeared. Eyes red from stress and lack of sleep. No camera, ready perfection anymore. Just a frightened woman watching her life unravel. Then she saw me and froze. Marcus. I said nothing. She stepped closer carefully, like approaching something dangerous. What did you do? Interesting. Not what's happening. Not can we talk. She already knew. I warned you to worry about yourself. Her voice trembled. My accounts are gone. Yes, you did this. You signed the contract. That wasn't a real contract. It was very real. Tears formed instantly in her eyes. You stole everything. I tilted my head slightly. Stole? Marcus, please. There it was. The shift, fear replacing superiority. Desperation replacing arrogance. I studied her quietly. 12 years together. And somehow this was the first honest expression I'd seen from her in a very long time. You told me I lacked ambition, I said softly. She shook her head quickly. Please stop. You said I was small. I didn't mean. You said you were trading up. Her tears spilled now. People nearby had started noticing the tension. Good. I didn't know, she whispered. No, I agreed calmly. You didn't, Marcus. What are you? That question lingered between us. What was I? A husband? A ghost? A billionaire hiding in thrift store apartments? A programmer who accidentally built financial infrastructure powerful enough to destabilize nations, or simply a man who discovered that love becomes impossible once wealth enters the equation. I am the reason Kyle's company exists, I said quietly. Her face drained of color. What? The framework, the reserve architecture, the security layers. She stared at me blankly. No. Yes. Then realization finally detonated behind her eyes. Not fully, but enough. Her breathing became shallow. You are Aion. I smiled faintly and said nothing. That silence answered everything. Nadia physically staggered backward, because suddenly every strange detail from the last decade rearranged itself inside her mind. The secrecy, the modest lifestyle, the endless coding nights, the hidden servers, the emotional distance whenever she asked about money. She wasn't married to a struggling consultant. She had been married to one of the most powerful invisible figures in global finance, and she left him for a man borrowing pieces of his empire. Oh my God, she whispered. For the first time since I met her, Nadia Kane truly understood what she had lost. Unfortunately for her, understanding arrived too late. Behind us, giant screens suddenly flickered. Breaking market alerts exploded across the conference hall. Vexora liquidity under investigation. Argentum reserve stress event worsens major withdrawals. Detected panic began spreading audibly through the crowd. Phones emerged instantly. Voices rose. Investors rushed toward exits and private call rooms. The atmosphere changed within seconds. No longer a conference, now a crisis zone. Then Kyle appeared from the far side of the lounge. The moment he saw me standing beside Nadia, he stopped cold. His expression looked almost haunted now, like a man realizing he'd accidentally stepped into deep water without knowing how to swim. You, he said quietly. I faced him calmly. Kyle's eyes searched my face desperately. You are Aion. Not a question, recognition. Defeat. Around us, the conference continued descending into chaos. Security teams rushed through corridors. Journalists shouted into cameras. Market losses accelerated visibly across live ticker screens. And still, I remained calm. Because this was never about money alone. It was about ownership, truth, and humiliation. Kyle took another step toward me. What do you want? I looked directly into his terrified eyes, then finally gave him the honest answer. Accountability. Chapter 4. The Flash Crash. By the time the keynote panel began, the conference no longer felt glamorous. It felt hunted. Fear moved through the convention center like an electrical current, invisible but unmistakable. Every conversation sounded tighter now, faster. Investors whispered into phones while pretending to network. Startup founders refreshed market charts every few seconds. Influencers suddenly stopped live streaming and started deleting posts. The illusion of infinite growth had cracked, and everyone sensed something worse was coming. No one knew the source, except me. And now Kyle knew too. That was the cruelest part for him. He finally understood the scale of the machine he'd built his success upon, and he understood it seconds before the machine devoured him. Backstage, conference staff scrambled to maintain composure. PR representatives insisted the volatility was temporary. Financial analysts were rushed into emergency interviews. Panel moderators received revised talking points, encouraging confidence and stability. Theatrics, all of it. Human civilization runs on coordinated reassurance, especially during collapses. Kyle stood near the stage entrance, staring at his phone while sweat rolled down his temples. His keynote makeup no longer hid the exhaustion in his face. 3 engineers were screaming through his earpiece simultaneously. Reserve failure accelerating, wallet drain spreading. Exchange confidence collapsing, institutional withdrawals increasing by the minute. Vexora's liquidity pools were eating themselves alive, and underneath it all, the hidden recursive backdoor continued executing exactly as designed. He looked at me once across the backstage corridor. No hatred anymore, only fear. Nadia stood several feet behind him, pale and silent, clutching her phone like it might somehow save her life. She had stopped crying. That's what happens when reality becomes too large for emotion. People go numb. The conference director rushed toward Kyle nervously. We need you on stage in 30 seconds. Kyle barely reacted. Delay it. We can't delay it. Media partners are already live. My platform's under attack. The director forced a corporate smile. That's exactly why people need reassurance right now. I almost admired the stupidity of that statement. Kyle laughed weakly, not because it was funny, because he finally realized no one cared whether he survived, only whether the audience stayed calm long enough to prevent panic. That's finance in its purest form. The moderator approached next. You still comfortable discussing ecosystem stability? Kyle stared at him in disbelief, then quietly said, Number, but they pushed him toward the stage anyway. Of course they did. The lights dimmed. Music thundered across the auditorium. Thousands of attendees applauded automatically while giant screens displayed glowing graphics behind the panelists. The Future of Digital Trust, beautiful title. Almost poetic now. Kyle walked onto the stage looking like a condemned man pretending to be successful. Nadia remained backstage near the curtains, unable to sit still, and I watched everything from the shadows, exactly where I belonged. At first, the panel proceeded normally. Questions about blockchain adoption, global banking integration, consumer trust, regulatory futures. Kyle answered mechanically while checking his phone beneath the table every few seconds. The audience noticed. So did the journalists. Then, the moderator asked the worst possible question. Given today's volatility surrounding Argentum reserves, do you believe decentralized finance remains secure? The auditorium quieted instantly. Thousands of people leaned forward waiting for reassurance. Kyle swallowed hard. Yes, he said carefully. Temporary stress events happen in every evolving financial ecosystem. Meanwhile, on my private monitor, Vexora's internal reserves crossed the critical threshold. Perfect timing. Kyle continued speaking. Our infrastructure remains strong because we built Vexora on transparent, decentralized principles. Then his phone vibrated violently. He glanced down, and all color drained from his face. Emergency liquidation event detected, the moderator noticed immediately. Kyle? No answer. Across the auditorium, attendee phones began vibrating simultaneously, one after another. Then dozens, then hundreds. A wave of notification sounds spread through the room. People looked down at their screens. Confusion erupted instantly. Market alerts. Massive sell. Offs reserve instability warnings. Exchange freezes. And then the number hit the global ticker. Argentum down 31%. The room exploded into noise. People stood abruptly. Investors rushed toward exits while shouting into phones. Security teams flooded aisles. Journalists abandoned the panel and sprinted toward broadcast stations. Panic had officially arrived, and this was still only phase 2. Kyle rose from his chair. We need to end this. But before he could leave, every screen in the auditorium suddenly flickered black. The crowd froze. Then a single symbol appeared, a silver circle. Minimal. Simple, recognizable instantly to every serious crypto developer on Earth. Argentum. Below it, one word emerged slowly across all screens. Aion. The entire auditorium went silent. Not metaphorically, literally silent. Thousands of people staring at the screens in disbelief, because legends aren't supposed to become real. Then my voice filled the hall, calm, measured, emotionless. For years, the financial world built fortunes atop systems it never truly understood. People turned frantically searching for the source. Kyle looked physically ill now. Nadia stepped backward near the curtains. Trembling, I continued. Developers copied infrastructure they could not maintain. Investors funded platforms they could not audit. Influencers monetized wealth they did not earn. The giant screens shifted. Wallet maps appeared. Transaction chains, ownership structures, corporate shells. Every line tracing back invisibly toward one origin point. Gasps spread across the auditorium, because now people understood. Vexora wasn't independent. It never had been. Kyle Torres had built his empire on borrowed architecture controlled by someone else, and that someone else had just stepped into the light. Then I walked onto the stage. The audience erupted instantly, shouting, phones recording, journalists screaming questions. Kyle stared at me like he was seeing a ghost, which, in a way, he was. I crossed the stage slowly while security froze in uncertainty. Nobody knew whether to stop me. Nobody wanted to. Power changes rooms instantly once recognized. The moderator looked terrified. Sir, I ignored him. Instead, I faced the audience. Most of you know me as a myth, I said calmly. The giant screens displayed original Argentum white papers behind me. Cryptographic proof signatures. Foundational blockchain records. Undeniable verification. I watched realization spread across thousands of faces simultaneously. The creator of Argentum had been hidden in plain sight for over a decade, and now he stood before them during the largest stablecoin destabilization event in modern history. History unfolding in real time. Kyle finally found his voice. You caused this. I turned toward him. I revealed it. You are crashing the market. No, I corrected softly. The market is crashing because people trusted men like you. The audience erupted again. Kyle stepped forward angrily. You are insane. And you are careless. I gestured toward the screens. You built Vexora using architecture you barely understood. You released open source code. Yes, I said calmly, and you copied it without comprehending the safeguards embedded inside it. Kyle's breathing became ragged around us. The market continued collapsing visibly on live financial feeds, billions evaporated by the minute. Then the next phase initiated automatically. The recursive reclaim protocols reached full execution. Every wallet tied directly to Vexora's synthetic leverage structures began draining simultaneously. Not stolen, reclaimed. The architecture itself viewed the ecosystem as compromised, so it corrected ownership autonomously. Thousands of attendees screamed as phones updated in real time. Balances disappearing, tokens liquidating, assets freezing, panic became chaos. Security teams attempted crowd control while people shoved toward exits. And still, I remained perfectly calm, because I had already accounted for all of this. Kyle's phone slipped from his hand onto the stage floor. Zero balances across every executive reserve account. Vexora was dead. Not weakened, not damaged dead. He looked at me with naked horror. How? I leaned closer slightly. You never understood the code. Then Nadia's voice shattered through the noise. Marcus, I turned. She stood near the edge of the stage crying openly now. Not elegant tears, not influencer sadness. Real panic, real devastation. My accounts are gone, she whispered. The crowd nearby recognized her immediately. Cameras swung toward her. Live streams exploded. Nadia Kane, the glamorous crypto influencer queen, was unraveling publicly in front of millions online. I know, I said quietly. You ruined me. Interesting choice of words. I stepped toward her slowly. No, I replied. You ruined yourself the moment you confused visibility with value. She shook her head desperately. You can reverse this. Please. There was genuine desperation in her now, not performance, not manipulation, fear, because for the first time in her adult life, Nadia understood what powerlessness felt like, and powerlessness terrifies people addicted to status. You said I lacked vision, I reminded her softly. Tears streamed down her face. I was wrong. Yes, I agreed calmly. You were. The screens behind us shifted again, now displaying archived transactions, luxury purchases, influencer sponsorships. Property, acquisitions. Every major financial boost in Nadia's public rise traced back secretly to anonymous Argentum wallets controlled by me. The audience gasped repeatedly. Journalists practically lost their minds. The glamorous self-made influencer empire had been quietly funded by the husband she abandoned. Nadia stared at the screens in disbelief. No, yes. Her knees nearly buckled, because now the humiliation became complete. Not only had she betrayed an extraordinarily wealthy man, her entire lifestyle had already belonged to him from the beginning. Kyle suddenly lunged toward me. Security intercepted him instantly. He screamed while guards restrained him near the stage edge. You destroyed everything. I looked directly at him. No, Kyle, I simply stopped protecting it. That line spread across social media within minutes. The clip exploded globally before the conference even ended. Meanwhile, financial markets entered full panic mode. Argentum plunged another 20%, then stabilized suddenly. Exactly as planned, because this was never intended to destroy the ecosystem permanently, only expose its parasites. The hidden recovery architecture activated quietly beneath public chaos. Strong platforms stabilized. Weak ones collapsed. Natural selection through code. Vexora never had a chance. Kyle continued struggling against security while screaming threats. Nadia just stood frozen, destroyed. And for a moment, despite everything, I pitied her. Not because she lost money, because she lost meaning. People like Nadia build identities around attention. Without the audience, they don't know who they are. Then my phone vibrated once. Victor, one message only. You just changed everything, maybe. Or maybe I simply revealed what already existed beneath the surface. I looked across the auditorium one final time. Thousands of frightened faces, investors, developers, journalists, influencers, all staring at me now with some mixture of awe, hatred, fear, and fascination. The invisible man was invisible no longer, and strangely, I felt lighter. For years, I had hidden behind anonymity because I believed exposure created vulnerability. But standing there amid the collapse, I finally understood something else. Secrecy had become its own prison. Nadia didn't destroy my life. She forced me out of hiding, and maybe that was the only gift betrayal ever gives anyone. Truth, raw and unavoidable. Security escorted Kyle away while cameras followed like vultures. Nadia remained standing alone on stage, abandoned by the same crowd that once worshipped her. No sponsors now, no admirers, no glamorous future, just consequences. I walked past her quietly toward the stage exit. She reached for my arm weakly. Marcus. I paused. Her voice broke completely. Did you ever really love me? That question hurt more than I expected, because beneath all the revenge, the answer remained painfully simple. Yes, I said softly. Then I walked away while the empire around her burned. Chapter 5. Quiet Water. 3 months later, nobody in crypto used the word stable casually anymore. The collapse of Vexora became a case study taught in financial seminars, cybersecurity conferences, and government hearings across the world. Entire documentaries emerged within weeks. The fall of the fintech king, the Aion revelation, the Dubai flash crash. Conspiracy channels exploded with theories about me. Some called me a genius. Others called me a terrorist, a market manipulator, a vigilante billionaire, a ghost who weaponized code against greed. The truth was simpler than all of that. I was a man who finally stopped protecting people who mistook my silence for weakness. And the world, as always, turned the story into mythology. Vexora died within 48 hours of the conference. Not slowly, not gracefully, completely. Once confidence vanished, institutional partners fled instantly. Exchanges delisted the platform to avoid contagion exposure. Venture firms publicly denied deeper involvement. Kyle's investors sued him within days. Developers abandoned ship almost immediately after discovering how dependent the app had been on Argentum architecture. Every interview Kyle ever gave became evidence against him. Every arrogant podcast clip resurfaced online. Every speech about innovation sounded pathetic in retrospect. The internet loves confidence right until confidence fails. Then it devours the confident alive. Kyle tried fighting publicly at first. He appeared on emergency live streams, insisting the attack was illegal. That Vexora had been sabotaged, that he was the victim, but blockchain evidence destroyed him. The architecture logs proved everything. He had copied infrastructure without understanding embedded permissions. His developers bypassed security audits repeatedly to accelerate growth. He ignored warnings from engineers concerned about liquidity recursion vulnerabilities. Worst of all, he had secretly leveraged customer reserves to inflate valuation metrics before the conference. That revelation buried him permanently. Within 2 weeks, federal investigations opened across 3 countries. By the end of the month, Kyle Torres disappeared from public view entirely. Last I heard, he was living in a rented condo outside Lisbon, fighting lawsuits while former investors hunted whatever remained of his assets. Funny thing about men like Kyle, they build identities around being admired. Once admiration dies, here is almost nothing underneath. Nadia's collapse happened differently. Slower, crueler, because social death unfolds in layers. At first, she tried surviving through sympathy, crying videos, emotional posts, claims that she had been manipulated by powerful men. Some followers supported her initially, but the transaction leaks destroyed any chance of public redemption. The internet learned her luxury image had been secretly financed through anonymous wallets tied directly to me for years. Designer vacations, sponsored launches, NFT acquisitions. Even the Monaco trip with Kyle had partially routed through hidden reserve structures originating from Argentum. Her self-made crypto queen identity evaporated overnight. Brands vanished first, then partnerships, then followers, then friends. People disappear quickly when status disappears, especially in influencer culture. Within a month, Nadia's management agency dropped her completely. 6 weeks later, paparazzi photos surfaced showing her working at a luxury retail store in Los Angeles under a different name. No makeup teams, no cameras, no private flights. Just fluorescent lights and hourly wages. The internet mocked her endlessly. I never joined in. Humiliation had already done enough. As for Argentum, it survived, barely, but it survived. Because underneath the public chaos, the architecture had performed exactly as intended. Weak leverage structures collapsed. Predatory liquidity systems imploded. Overextended ecosystems died. But the core network stabilized stronger afterward. Governments hated me publicly while privately relying on Argentum reserves to prevent wider contagion. Banks condemned decentralized finance while secretly integrating surviving infrastructure into their own systems. Nothing changes human behavior faster than profit. Victor contacted me once during the aftermath, only once. You were right about one thing, he admitted quietly over encrypted video. That's rare for you. The ecosystem needed correction. I poured whiskey while watching ocean waves through open windows. By then, I was already far from Dubai, far from everything. But, I asked. Victor sighed heavily. You enjoyed it too much. Interesting observation, because maybe he was right, or maybe satisfaction simply looks monstrous when powerful people finally face consequences. You still think I became the villain, I said. No, Victor answered after a pause. I think you became honest. That stayed with me. Honest. Maybe revenge is ultimately honesty stripped of politeness. People spend years hiding resentment beneath manners and restraint. Then one day the mask slips, and everyone acts shocked by what was always there. After Dubai, media companies offered me fortunes for interviews. Streaming platforms wanted documentaries. Publishers offered absurd contracts. Governments requested private meetings. I declined everything. Visibility had already cost me enough. Instead, I liquidated most of my Argentum stake carefully over several months through sovereign intermediaries and offshore structures. The final number exceeded anything even financial analysts predicted. Enough money to disappear forever, which was exactly what I intended. 6 months after the crash, Marcus Kane officially ceased to exist publicly. No interviews, no speeches, no social media accounts, nothing. The world built myths in the silence. Some claimed I died. Others believed I relocated to Switzerland under armed protection. A few conspiracy theories insisted Aion had never been a single person at all. I let them speculate. The truth belonged only to me now, and the truth was surprisingly quiet. I bought a small island in the South Pacific under another name, not the billionaire fantasy people imagine. No mega mansion, no helicopter pad, no endless parties. Just a modern house built into cliffs overlooking black volcanic beaches and endless water. No cameras, no conferences, no attention. For the first time in over a decade, silence felt peaceful instead of strategic. Mornings became simple. Coffee on the terrace, ocean wind, books I never had time to read, swimming at sunrise, no market alerts screaming across monitors, no interviews, no pretending to be smaller than I was. The strangest part wasn't the wealth. It was the absence of performance. Most rich people are exhausted because they're constantly trying to prove they're rich. I no longer needed proof. One evening during the rainy season, I sat outside watching storms roll across the Pacific when an encrypted message appeared on my private tablet. Unknown sender. I almost ignored it, then opened it. Nadia, no photo, no branding, no manipulation. Just words. I know I don't deserve a response. Interesting beginning. I kept reading. I spent a long time hating you for what happened. Then I spent even longer hating myself. Long pause between paragraphs. You were right about something. I never knew who you really were, but the truth is, I don't think I ever knew who I was either. The next line took longer to process than I expected. When everything disappeared, I realized how much of my life depended on being seen. I thought admiration meant love. I thought attention meant value. I thought money meant safety. Another pause. Then finally, you asked me once what kind of life I actually wanted. I laughed at you because your answer sounded small. Now I think maybe your life was the only real thing I ever had. No dramatic plea, no request for money, no begging. Just honesty. At last, I stared at the ocean for a long time afterward, then typed a single reply. I hope you find peace, nothing more. Some stories don't deserve reunions, only endings. She never contacted me again. Years passed quietly after that. The world moved on the way it always does. New cryptocurrencies emerged. New influencers became famous. New fintech visionaries promised to revolutionize everything. Human beings never really learn. They just update the vocabulary surrounding greed. Occasionally, someone online still claimed to have discovered the true identity of Aion. Forums debated endlessly. Podcasts analyzed old conference footage frame by frame. Myths continued growing larger than reality, but none of them knew the truth. The truth was sitting barefoot on a terrace overlooking the Pacific while waves crashed against volcanic stone below. No security teams, no luxury entourage, no performance, just peace. One night, nearly 4 years after Dubai, I watched a storm move across the horizon while reading old archived blockchain messages from Argentum's earliest days. Idealistic. Nonsense. Dreams about decentralization freeing humanity from corruption. Funny, looking back. Technology never changes human nature. It only amplifies it. But maybe that's enough, because systems eventually reveal people exactly as they are. Kyle revealed greed. Nadia revealed emptiness. And me. I revealed what happens when invisible men stop staying invisible. The storm rolled closer slowly, lightning flickering across distant clouds. I closed the tablet and listened to the ocean. Somewhere out there, billions of dollars still moved daily through systems I created. Governments regulated them, corporations exploited them, traders worshipped them. But none of it belonged to me emotionally anymore. That was the real victory. Not the money, not the revenge. Freedom. Real freedom. The kind that begins when you stop needing the world to misunderstand you correctly. And in the end, that was the final irony. Nadia once accused me of lacking ambition because I wanted a quiet life. But after all the collapse, after all the exposure, after all the wealth and destruction and revenge, a quiet life was still the only thing I ever truly wanted.